Many people who suffer from mental illness, like myself, seek death in one form or another. Some commit suicide, whether by their own free will or with the help of a police officer. Others engage in dangerous activities that greatly increase their chances of dying. Most just continue to trudge along, miserable with no real prospects of becoming happy, but too cowardly to end it. I belong to the second category, until one fateful day. My mental problems were apparently difficult to diagnose. Some days I was completely normal, some days I was withdrawn, some days I was manic. Although I made good money, I was self-employed and did not have good health insurance. Since I didn't have health insurance for my illness, I didn't have the money, or at least I wasn't willing to spend it, to get checked out by top-notch psychiatrists. So I just decided to take advantage of some half-helpful medications. Despite my mental health issues, I always seemed attractive to women, until they got to know me better and experienced my epic mood swings. I'm large and was told I was very good-looking, so I was a particular favorite with women, albeit not sophisticated ones. This was fine with me, as I was mostly only seeking sexual gratification, especially knowing that no woman was likely to put up with my erratic nature for longer than a few weeks. Despite my erratic nature, I had a couple of longtime good male friends, Jack and Kevin. I enjoyed their company, as long as I didn't fall into a state of withdrawal. Kevin, in particular, was always trying to get me to do unusual things. He considered himself a cabinet therapist. He'd usually say, "Hey, Brian, this will really boost your blood serotonin levels and lift your mood." At Kevin's insistence, I made it to his regular yoga class, something I thought I would never do, on Saturday mornings. I complained to Kevin that it was a damn bad idea as we warmed up while other class participants, dressed in their yoga suits, at least that's what I called them, slowly arrived for class. My complaints began to subside when I saw that most of the other students in the class were women, and very attractive ones at that. My whining stopped completely when a woman who could only be characterized as sunshine on a cloudy day walked into the classroom leading her friend. "Who the hell is that?" I asked Kevin quietly, nodding my head in the direction of the walking erotic dream. "Poison," was his unsmiling reply. "Don't even think about it. We'll talk about it later." I moved behind my date's back to watch her as inconspicuously as possible as she moved from one yoga pose to another. Although it was a beginner's class, most of the other participants, like Kevin, had been practicing there for 5 weeks, so I was way behind. I wasn't doing the poses very well, not only because of my lack of knowledge and practice, but also because I was getting excited looking at the most beautiful thighs and ass I had ever seen. After the class was over, before Kevin could stop me, I approached the siren. "Hi, I'm Brian, and this is my first class. How long have you been doing this to be as cool as you are in the positions?" I asked. Over the course of the hour-long class, I went from being almost withdrawn to one of my manic states. Maybe there's something of serotonin in that. My mind flashed through my head. When I'm in a manic state, I'm friendly and extroverted. The object of my lust looked me over from head to toe before answering. Her voice sounded like she had just stepped out of an Italian movie, so strong and passionate was her accent. "Maybe a week," she replied with a devilish smile. "Not very English. I'm the only one like this," she continued, holding out her hand. I took her hand and shook it. Her handshake was soft and firm at the same time. I couldn't help but be mesmerized by her enchanting brown eyes and the way she lifted her lips slightly. I know it was my imagination, but I felt like she was looking into my soul. Apparently, we just stood there shaking hands for a completely inappropriate amount of time because a friend, Gina, walked over to us, gently pulled Gina's right hand and said roughly, "We need to leave, Gina." When Gina looked at her, still holding my hand, the friend said, "Abbatissa bisogno di lasciare, Gina," and Gina smoothly removed her hand from mine. "See you at the next class," I said too cheerfully and with a wide grin, still looking into Gina's eyes. "Yeah, Will, ciao," she replied with a sly smile. Gina's friend threw fierce glances at me as Gina turned to leave, and I heard her friend say something to her in Italian as they walked out of the classroom. Gina seemed to react to her friend's mini-tirade by simply waving her hand in a dismissive manner. As soon as they were out the door, a sweaty and grim-faced Kevin approached me. "Dude, we need to talk, but wait until they're far away," he whispered to me. I wiped myself down, chatted with the diminutive, friendly female instructor as she came over and asked how my first class went. And after everyone left, a still grim Kevin grabbed my arm and led me to the corner of the room. "What's your problem, dude?" I grinned. "You're the one with the problem, Brian, that I'm worried about. I told you this woman is a real poison, and the reason is because she's married to a high-ranking gangster." "How the hell do you know that?" I asked skeptically. "Because it was in the paper about 2 months ago. There was a picture of a well-known Don and Gina in the local press with a caption that read something like, 'Well-known local crime lord Lazzaro Gambini returns from his wedding in Italy with his new Italian bride, Gina Ricci.'" I looked at Kevin skeptically. "Come to my house and we'll find it on the internet," he muttered in response to my skepticism. Shortly after we entered Kevin's house, I learned 2 things. Gina was actually married to Lazzaro Gambini, and practicing yoga really did make my muscles ache. I could barely walk the rest of the day. The realization that Gina was married to a gangster didn't impress me as much as it does most people. Like I said, I'm crazy. I viewed establishing a relationship with Gina as a thrill, some would say a death wish, rather than a retreat. Luckily, our yoga classes were twice a week, so I only had to wait 3 days to see her again because all I could think about was her. Even though I'm a geek, I'm also smart. I devised a plan to woo Gina that I thought might work, and that was worth a try. I decided to be especially nice to Gina's friend. Kevin told me that he didn't know her name, and Gina were almost always the last to arrive to class, and I intended to use that information to my advantage. Towels were provided in the classroom, but they were not in abundance. I got to class early, counted the towels, and made sure there was one less than there were students, and hid the rest in the men's room and prayed that everyone would be there that day. Fortunately, they were. When Gina and her friend entered the classroom just before class started, I smiled at them both. Gina smiled back, but her friend did not. As they walked over to the towel rack, the friend gave the last one to Gina and then started looking around for another. I jumped to my feet, walked over to my friend and said, "They don't seem to have enough towels today. Why don't you take mine? I haven't used it yet, and I'll go look for another. By the way, my name is Brian," I said with a perfectly cheerful look and a wide smile. She looked at me sternly at first, and then her expression seemed to soften as she took the towel from my hands and said, "Thank you." "What's your name?" I asked cheerfully, holding out my hand. "Adriana," she said cautiously as she shook my hand. "What a beautiful name." A true statement, but obviously a sycophancy, to which she responded positively. "It's nice to meet you, Adriana," I continued. At this point, the instructor called the class to order. "I'll find more towels," I said quietly to Adriana as I quickly left the room and just as quickly returned with 4 towels that I had hidden in the men's room. I offered a second towel each to Gina and Adriana, but both shook their heads negatively, Gina with a smile and Adriana without a smile, but without frowning either. In this class, I stared less blatantly at Gina's gorgeous ass and thighs and met Adriana's gaze fleetingly a couple of times. I think I need to describe Gina and Adriana a little more fully. Adriana is about 180 centimeters tall and muscular. She can't be called unattractive, but she can't be close to being beautiful either. She looks to be in her early 30s, and she is sturdy. She speaks almost perfect English without an accent, and also, as far as I can tell, fluent Italian. Gina looks about my age, about 25 to 26. Her height is about 165 centimeters, and she has a slender build. Not thin, but more inclined to that than fullness. In addition to the aforementioned perfect ass, hips, and eyes, and a face bordering on beauty, she has what I've heard referred to as it. It's hard to say exactly what quality makes her the epitome of sexy, but she has it. That it. She was the first person I met in my life with the it factor, or at least what I perceived as the it factor. Gina's spoken English was poor, but she tried and seemed to understand almost everything she was told in English. After class, I made it a habit to talk to both Gina and Adriana, trying to spend as much time as possible looking into the eyes of both. I even touched Adriana lightly on the elbow as I made what I thought was a joking comment, to which she smiled, and Gina immediately laughed when Adriana translated my comment into Italian. After that class, Adriana began to treat me more friendly, though still wary, and I made it a habit to park near or between them during each class. After one class, I invited them to join me for coffee and biscotti at a local Italian cafe. Of course we can go, Adriana. Gina brightened up. For about a minute, they chatted in Italian. Their body language didn't indicate that they were fighting, but there were no smiles on their faces either. My treat, I interjected. Good, they replied in unison. Gina smiled broadly and Adriana smiled slightly. I was a little puzzled when a black sedan with tinted windows seemed to follow us all the way to the cafe, but I didn't tell Gina or Adriana that. At the cafe, I had a very pleasant conversation with both of them. Gina's English was getting better each time, and she used very few Italian words in this setting. Adriana only had to translate one thing I said. In the middle of our meeting, I felt Gina's sandal rest on my foot. I didn't remove my foot. After a few minutes, she removed her foot, and I discreetly removed my right shoe and played with her foot. I hugged them both goodbye, first gently hugging Adriana and then also hugging Gina. I was confused again when they walked up to the sedan with tinted windows and got into the back seat, but although I didn't show it, my heart jumped when Gina gave me a truly seductive smile that neither Adriana nor the driver of the car could see. That night, I picked up a woman at the bar who was as similar to Gina in appearance as possible and vigorously fucked her 4 times, fantasizing that it was Gina. I knew I had to find a way to get laid for real, but with Gina traveling in a car with Adriana and some thug, I had a hard time coming up with a plan. At the next yoga class, Gina solved that problem for me. Before class even started, with Adriana clearly turned away, Gina slipped me a piece of paper. I clutched it tightly in my hand and then walked over to my shoes and slipped it into one of them before returning to my warm-up. Gina was devilishly flirtatious with me that day, including one time where she stood with her legs stretched out and pointed her charms at me. When I saw this, I instantly had a very noticeable desire. After class, I invited them over for coffee and biscotti again, but Adriana politely declined, and Gina only smiled. After everyone left, I looked at the piece of paper in my shoe. Meet me in the lobby of the Hotel Blanco on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Change your clothes. It was all I could do not to spontaneously fuck up my pants. The wait from noon Saturday to 2 p.m. Tuesday seemed to take a month. The Hotel Blanco was a mid-range hotel in a remote part of town, probably a good 15 to 20 kilometers from the part of town where Gina and Adriana said they lived. I got there early, as the overdressed Gina had told me to, though probably not very successfully. However, I almost didn't recognize her. The disguise was great. She was wearing a blonde wig, green contact lenses, lined clothes, and stompy shoes. "Why don't you get a room?" she muttered, stroking my arm. 2 keys. I did as instructed, and then found her behind a column in the lobby. "What room?" she asked, taking one of the keys from me. 414, I answered. "See you in 5 minutes," she whispered with a devilish grin on her face. Waiting in the room, I stripped down to my boxers and brushed my teeth. Neither of us had any doubts about what was about to happen, so why pretend? Gina walked into room 414 with the same evil smirk on her face that she had seen in the lobby. She smoothly walked over to me, captured the most passionate kiss I had ever received on my lips, and then ran her hand down my underpants. It only took a few seconds to remove the conservative skirt and soft pullover blouse. After a few minutes of just tormenting each other, I presented her with a taser, also known as 2 in plus, 1 in stink, or 2 in the wound, 1 in the stash. Apparently, she had never had one of these before. Despite the rapidity of our ecstasy, we were both sweating profusely because we had put so much effort into it. It was real sex. You must be the best slut on the planet. This brought a wide smile to her face as she covered my cheeks and neck with kisses. We lay in each other's arms, smiling and chatting. When we recovered from our second sex, we showered together and then had a serious talk. "You know what's dangerous with me, Brian? I realize your husband is a gangster, Why did you marry him? In Italy, I didn't have much choice. My father, my mother, because of this, I want to move to the States, decided I could live with it. It's not a lot of fun. I don't think there's any way you can leave him. He'd probably kill whoever I left with and hurt me badly. What if he finds out I slept with you? We'll kill you for sure and hurt me badly again. I'm careful, but I need you to fuck me. You, as they say, turn me on. Gina, you're the most amazing woman I've ever seen. I need to keep sleeping with you. She smiled broadly and then kissed me. What's the story with Adriana? The story? I mean, what's going on with her? She's a real Americano. She has Italian parents. She speaks good Italian too, and my husband says she's my, I'm not sure how to say this. Bodyguard? No. Companion? Maybe, but not exactly. Personal assistant? Yes, that's right. Personal assistant. Although Adriana is friendly and I like her, I think she's subservient to my husband. She likes you, but I think our driver's not happy. Is that the guy who picked you up in the black sedan with tinted windows? Yeah, Luciano. He's my bodyguard. He likes my ass, but I think that's the right word. My husband's puppet. I laughed. Puppet is probably right. So how did you manage to escape today? I'm supposed to be in English class. My teacher, she's got my back. I'm good at studying on my own, so everyone says I'm doing well. Can we meet again? I asked, lightly stroking her face. You bet, Gina laughed. We need something better than my yoga note for the future. I agree. I'll buy us a couple disposable phones the next time we meet, I said as I continued to stroke her face. Then we exchanged a passionate kiss. You're going to leave now. I need to clean myself up, she said. Take a shower? I grinned. Yes, that, she smiled. I'll see you at yoga. After another passionate kiss, I left and immediately bought 2 disposable cell phones. My sexual experience with Gina was not only the best of my life, I had different feelings for her than I had for any other woman. I wasn't sure what love was, but I was willing to admit that that was what my feelings for her were. I knew damn well I was playing with fire, or poison, as Kevin put it. I mean, the young, sultry wife of a major crime lord. I didn't give a shit. I think this is where the lust for death comes into play. I really felt like I was on the path to wanting to be with Gina all the time, and I didn't care what the risks were. Over the next 2+ months, Gina and I became very close. We had sex a couple hours a week, and it was always amazing. We really connected on a personal level as well, both when we were alone and during and after yoga class, which we still attended twice a week. To throw Adriana off balance, I always complimented her loudly with a wide smile, while Gina only gave me a sneaky smile. During this time, Gina also learned to speak English pretty well, although she still had that sexy Italian accent. I hope she never gets rid of it, it turns me on. She could easily understand and respond to most English sentences. In those 2+ months, I learned a lot about Gina and her situation. She was essentially forced to marry Lazzaro Gambini. The sex with him was horrible. In public, he treated her like a trophy rather than a truly functioning, rational human being, and constantly humiliated her in private. Gina had a real talent for painting anything, from portraits to houses, and making pottery. One afternoon, after an exceptionally wonderful, even for us, sexual encounter where she sat on my lap and looked into my soul with her doe eyes while we mercilessly had each other, tears came to Gina's eyes. I wish we were together, Brian. I'm on the verge of a breakdown over being married to that cattle Lazzaro. But he'd kill us. After she cried for a while, what had been on my mind since I'd met her boldly came to the forefront. Run with it, I said to myself. Lifting Gina's chin, I looked into her eyes, smiled, and said, By next week, I'll have a plan for how we can be together forever. Even if we get caught, you probably won't suffer any consequences, just me. She wiped away her tears and smiled. I hope so, she giggled, and then hugged and kissed me fervently. Although I had no doubts that I was going to continue, I surprised myself by making a list of pros and cons for both the overall concept and each individual scenario I came up with. The fact that I was going to get killed was not on either list. either for or against, although that possibility was real. The major plus for the overall concept was that since I'd met Gina, I hadn't had a truly bad day. Not one. My worst day was ordinary, and my best days were much better than ever before. I wasn't fickle anymore. I guess serotonin really does work, I said to myself. And Gina makes me drink a pint of that drink every time I just think about her, not to mention giving her a hug. The next week when we had our Monday morning sex fest, Adriana and Lazaro were starting to trust Gina more, so she had a little more freedom to leave at different times. I explained to Gina the scenario I had chosen. She loved it. No, she really liked it. All she had to do was gather up anything that might be of value to her and bring it in an extra gym bag to her next yoga class, change Adriana's water bottle, and do a little theater. At the next yoga class, I was excited, but calm at the same time. Gina looked excited too. As I was hugging Adriana, I slipped Gina my water bottle of the same brand as Adriana's, and she surreptitiously traded it for Adriana's bottle. When class was over, Gina and I engaged Adriana in a lively discussion while she drank the water until everyone dispersed. Then Gina pretended to be dizzy and fainted. Adriana knelt down beside her. The sleeping pills I had slipped into Adriana's water bottle weren't working fast enough to satisfy me, so I resorted to Plan B and stuck Adriana with a small needle while holding her by the neck. A few seconds later, she passed out. I grabbed Gina's gym bag and we ran to the front door. Before we got out, I threw Gina over my shoulder and carried her to the car. I yelled to Luciano that something was wrong with Gina and Adriana. He was skeptical at first, but since Gina was great on stage, he bought the hook, line, and sinker. I begged him to go get Adriana while I put Gina's seatbelt on in the back seat. Luckily, he did so, leaving the keys in the ignition, so I didn't have to resort to the backup of pulling out my gun and handcuffing him. As soon as he entered the building, I jumped into the driver's seat and sped off. We drove to my house, where in the covered parking lot I had all the tools I needed to remove the GPS and LoJack from Luciano's car and change the license plates to the ones I had stolen the day before from a car of similar make and color. I took my 2 suitcases I had packed over the past few days, which contained every last dime of cash or regular debit cards, including the money from the sale of my car and any other valuables I had, and we left. I put the LoJack tracker and GPS unit from Luciano's car in the trunk of a large truck with Nevada plates parked at a truck stop, and we drove in the opposite direction of the artist colony that I hoped we could make our home, at least for a while. After putting 300 kilometers between us and Lazaro, we stopped at a motel, paid cash, and loved each other to death. I think that was the happiest day of my life. "So what are your plans now?" Gina asked me, lying on my chest. "First, we're going to buy a used car that I can pay cash for and get rid of the one we have now. I have enough money to get us through 2 years without having to look for a proper job. Since they'll find the car, we'll go back the way we came and keep going until we get to the artist's colony I've chosen." "An artist's colony?" she asked excitedly. "Hell yeah! You can do painting and pottery, and most of the people in these places are easy to get along with. They don't ask too many questions." "I love you," she grinned, and then kissed me hard. "I'll return the favor," I chuckled. "Eventually, we'll need new IDs, and once we get them, we can do whatever we want. I wonder if Lazaro will call the police to help get his kidnapped wife back, or would that be too much of a humiliation for him?" "I wonder that too," I grinned. "I guess we'll find out. But I'm sure of one thing." "What's that?" Gina asked, stroking my chest. "I'm not going to bring you back. If they catch us, I'll die fighting them, but as long as I have a pulse, they won't take you.